Good morning, everybody. This is Martin John, and I am here to talk about the Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching is an ancient text written about 600 BCE. Before Common Era is BCE. Before Christ is BC. I don't know. I just started saying BCE at some point. I don't really care either way. BC, BCE, blah, 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 blah. It's all the same. But, right. The Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching, one of the great things about the Tao Te Ching that I always kind of mention is that it helps us live a more reasonable life. It's not about a religion, it's not about, but it's a philosophy of how to live a more reasonable life. What I mean by living a more reasonable life is that we live a life that is not asking other things to change for us. So when we think about this, is it reasonable to want it to stop raining? Well, sure, you can want it to stop raining, but is it reasonable for the rain to alter your life in any way? Is it reasonable for, it's reasonable to want the upstairs neighbors to be more quiet, but it is more reasonable to not let that disturb you, right? Like, sure, you have a right, and it seems like you have a right to be like, oh, I just want my space to be quiet. Yes, I understand that, but they want something as well. So when we start to think about the world and we think about like everybody's place in it, everybody has wants and desires. Whose is more important? Nobody's. So you let other people do what they do and you do what you do. And as long as, you're true to that, meaning that you don't, like you can surrender to things without submitting to them, right? You can surrender to the idea that, oh, well, it's loud when my neighbors walk around. Okay, that's okay. Versus submitting to their, keeping you up all night playing music or doing something like that, right? Like if they have, loud music playing at 11 o'clock at night, it's like, okay, well, you don't have to necessarily, you can kind of go on, knock the door and say, hey, like this and that, whatever. But not wanting things to change, even if you can't, like not doing even that would even be surrendering even more to like, they're going to do what they do. And that's even better, to always just yield to allow other people to live the lives that they want so that you can always remember that you're here to live the life you want. If anything is stopping you from doing something, you're going to want to stop others from doing something. I remember one time I was doing a talk and someone got upset because I told him about a ticket that I had gotten out of or whatever. I got pulled over and . And then he was just like, well, shouldn't everybody in society have to pay for their, and I was like, that's interesting. And he was upset, and I said, we all sort of fall into these categories of living under the influence of things. And I asked him what he does for a living. And because my first thought was that, oh, this man is upset because he had to abide by someone else's rules. And so he believes everybody needs to abide by the rules that are set for them. And what ended up happening was that I asked him, do you have a lot of education? He was like, yes. And so that kind of led me to the school thing and being like taking, having to get good grades and all that. And I said, well, what do you do? And I was like, my guess is you spent a lot of time in school. He's like, oh, yeah, I'm an engineer. And I was like, oh, you're an engineer. And I said, did you always want to be an engineer? And he paused. And I took those 2 or 3 seconds that he paused. And then I just said, that's all I need to know. See, that's the problem. You're living under the influence probably of your parents. And because you had to do that in your mind, your parents influenced you to such a degree that they they had you under their influence, and they had you living the life that they wanted you to live. And you did not know that you could tell them to fuck off. You did not know that you could tell them they weren't right for your life, because the frame of reference that you built was around being under their influence. So now that you having a faulty sense of like reality because you are under the influence of your parents, because you have a frame of reference that states you have to do what your parents want you to do, you go out into the world and do what your parents want and then expect everybody else is doing that as well, because your frame of reference is you live your life and do what other people tell you. And so, because there are rules, we all have to abide the rules. And he got upset that I had gotten out of a ticket or whatever. I mean, I don't remember the exact story, but that's what happens when we build these kind of false frames of reference and then get mad at the world and can't recognize that that's just because of us. There is no we, really. I mean, there is the we, the grand we of Tao, but your perceptions of the world are coming from your experience, and your experience is very different from everybody else's, and we don't often recognize that. And so when we say, well, I'm quiet for you, that doesn't mean they have to be quiet for us. They have a different frame of reference, they have a different experience than we do. So living life in a way that's more reasonable. We're always trying to become more and more reasonable. Right? It's not reasonable. Like, right, that's why they say Karens aren't reasonable, right? But Karens aren't reasonable because they want the world to revolve around them, no matter how they see the world. And if anybody sees it the same way as they do or not, they want people to act as if they do. And so they try and, control the world around them so that they can get what they want when they want and how they want. And we do that in many different ways. And that doesn't mean that it has to be bad or good or whatever. I mean, some people live in a state of being desolate, of being poor their whole lives, because they have a frame of reference that supports that idea, right? And then they get mad at rich people, right? Rich people make them angry. ... Is that reasonable? No. Those are just other people living lives. But we've been so accustomed in our world, right? Like, I mean, I'm a Gen X, so I grew up there was, as I was a teenager and stuff, like Jerry Springer and all these kind of crappy shows of judging people were on. And I'm seeing how all of those judgments, all of those generations of judging people have really led to us being judgmental, like if we, and we make fun of people, and it's like, it's not reasonable in any way, shape, or form. I also kind of was thinking this morning about political correctness and how we abided political correctness, but all we did was suffocate the voices that wanted to be more racist, suffocated and suppressed the voices that wanted to be hateful, suppressed the voices that wanted to be mean. And now they're coming back with a vengeance, right? Like now, like mean, racist, like gratuitous, violent, like voices are finding power because they've been suppressed. And I don't think there is anything good about suppressing things. We spoke recently one of the verses, like there was the dissolution of Tao that we read 38. I think that might have even been yesterday. Yeah, Terry picked 38 yesterday, and we talked about it with Ellen. The kind man does, and in so doing reveals all that remains undone. Right? The kind man is the man who wants to be nice. Right? The just man is the man who wants everything just, who wants everything equal, and all of that. And those are the things. And then the moral man does it does, and then when there's no support, um, will use force to gain consensus. Like doing all of those things, right? Being just, being kind, being moral, all of that stuff, like, is what political correctness really sort of embraced. It was just like, oh, look, we're going to be nice to people, so we're not going to be mean to them, and everyone's going to win an award. Oh, we're going to be just so that everybody, is treated fairly, and all of this. And all it did was put people out, to put some people out, especially people who, like white males, right, who had power. Like, it put them out, and so they got even more upset, right? And now they're standing on their own, trying to say what they need to say. When we talk about the dissolution of Tao, we talk about, like, when Tao is lost, we lean on etiquette. Etiquette is saying the right thing, doing the right thing, outwardly. But when that fails, we turn to morality. We say, oh, this is the moral thing to do, right? And then we stand up for people and do all of that. And then when morality dissolves, we teach ritual. So it was really interesting. One time, let's look at this. I was with my niece. My niece only knows ritual. Okay, she knows ritual, and she knows that it came from this moral high ground sort of thing. And I was watching a soccer game, and it was like, I don't know, it was like one of the African teams playing another team, and it was a friendly, and it was a women's it was like a women's World Cup game. And let's say it was the Ivory Coast. She was like, well, why is everybody on the Ivory Coast African American? And I was like, well, nobody on the Ivory Coast is African American. I don't know what you mean. And I realized that she doesn't know or understand the phrase African American, but she utilizes it because she's trying to, like, be right? She understands that it's right to call Black people in the United States African American. Like, however, even if they're living in the United States, that doesn't necessarily, like, I know plenty of Caribbean Blacks who don't appreciate being called African American. Whether or not, we can talk about, like, distantly they came from Africa or whatever. I don't want to kind of get into any of that conversation. But all she knows is the ritual of calling someone that looks a certain way. But that's not, like, she's not even recognizing why the phrase, or where the phrase African American came from, right? She's just using it in place of Black, because she, in her frame of reference, in her experience, Black is not something that you should call somebody. But it's like, well, we're white. That's not, is that offensive to you? No, we're white. They're Black. It's the same, right? Like, there's no, like, they're African. They're not African American. They're from the Ivory Coast. That's in the continent of Africa. Like, just like we're Americans, but so are people from South America. They're Americans too, but we don't see them that way because we're so kind of confused about, like, well, white people are the only thing that matter, right? Like, so those were a couple things that were coming to me today. I am here to present Tao of the Day, and I'm kind of going over this number 38 that we looked at with Terry and Ellen yesterday. I'm going to go ahead and pick a number for today, unless somebody wants to step up and pick a number. I would be happy to share the Tao with you. I'm going to pick 76. Life is Flexible is the title to number 76. It is true for all things that while aligned with life, there is yielding, flexibility, and grace. It is also the case that aligned with death, all things are stiff, brittle, and inflexible. In all things, we can witness plainly, rigidity of any kind is a companion of death. Softness of any kind is a companion of life. Be soft and yielding. It overcomes rigidity. So be soft and yielding. Earlier, I was talking about the idea that, like, oh, your neighbors are making noise. Oh, like it's loud when they walk around or they're playing music. And the idea is to be flexible. The idea is to allow those things to be as they are, right? The idea is to, in order to live a more reasonable life, we want to not want even to change that which is happening around us. Sure, it's natural to want, and that's a long process to get to a place where you don't have desire. However, that is the direction we want to go. Now, you could um, you could step in front of yourself and say, well, I don't want to not want anything ever. Like that doesn't sound like a good idea. It's really interesting. When I was early, I got 23 plus years clean and sober, and a big aspect of that when I started was like, well, if I don't do this, who will I be? And that question that comes up, I can't imagine myself that way. But just because I can't imagine myself that way today doesn't mean I shouldn't make a move to go towards that. We tell ourselves these stories so that we don't have to change. If we can be more yielding, and if when I talk about not having desire, and that's what this is about. Life is flexible. If you have a desire for something and only want to see it one way or execute it in one way, well, then you're only looking at it from one perspective. You're not taking into consideration that the person who is going to benefit from this action you're taking today isn't you, it's a future you. And that future you has a different concept of life. That future you has a different way of seeing life. And so if you're out here with desire and you're like, oh, you know what? Like the Tao is talking about not having desire. Okay, well, I don't want to have no desire. Whoa. The Tao is talking about not having desire. Before you say, I don't want, right? That's a desire in and of itself. Like you're holding on to keeping desire. Now, there is no benefit really from wanting no desire, right? Because that's an endless cycle of wanting to not want, wanting to not want, wanting to not want. You arrive at no desire, right? You arrive at not wanting. You don't attempt to do it. You just arrive at it. So I'm going to read this again, then we're going to talk about flexibility. It is true for all things while aligned with life, there is yielding, flexibility, and grace. It is also the case that aligned with death, all things are stiff, brittle, and inflexible. Saying, I want to not want is stiff, brittle, and inflexible. Saying, no, I can't do that. I wouldn't want, like as soon as you plant your flag somewhere, you're being inflexible. And by being inflexible, you get yourself into this place that you are aligned with death. Penny's on, and I'm going to bring her up, and maybe we can look at a number or what have you.
Hey, so good to see you.
Nice to see you. How are you doing, Penny?
Oh, in a wide sense, really, really well. In other ways, life is always challenging.
Well, meet them with flexibility. Meet
What
those
a lovely,
challenges with flexibility.
yeah, and with no desire or attachment to outcome. And it's learning how to exist in a space awareness where you do not have that desire.
Yeah, and like again, like I was just saying, like wanting to not have desire is desire,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
We could
so
get beyond that.
arriving at not desiring is what is desirable. you
Yeah.
know, like like
Yeah.
I love it in my life where I recognize that I was doing something without desire. And I'm
Yeah.
also very grateful when I tell myself that I'm not doing something with any desire or expectation, and then it happened, then something comes of it that maybe is unpleasant, and I realize that I did have expectations. Let me look back and see where I might be able to kind of um, see those a little clearer next time.
Yeah. And isn't it wonderful when you get into that space where it's almost a let go and surrender,
Yeah,
and let go and let be, in a sense.
right,
Um, and a lot of people talk about it as being in the flow, don't they? Being connected to a space where you have literally no desire and you just let go, and the universe, the Tao, kind of just does its thing, and you find yourself in the best place possible for you at the time.
right. And it's going to take you to that in ways that you might not have.
Yeah, the minute you start to put a desired description, outcome, or a method in place, you are confining, restricting the Tao.
Right. And well, yeah, and then you start perceiving things and then it starts to be a struggle.
Mm, yeah.
Once you start to, there is a verse in here, and if I can think of some words, I might be able to find it. But it talks about this idea that like when things acquire a name,
Yes.
when
Yeah.
you're in the flow, you're doing great. Um, I'm going to see if I can find it.
Yeah. While you're finding it, it's like just recently I have experienced it, as we all do, kind of in cycles, don't we? Because the minute we start to restrict things by our desire and our intention, then you start to struggle, as you said. And recently I've been putting out to the universe, I think as we all do, I want a way to financially exist as a personality in this world without struggling, in a way that I love to do. And I kind of putting it out to the universe, and I've been watching things pop up that could be the answer. And I've been kind of grabbing onto them and saying, well, let's explore this. And then a little bit further down the line, I discover that I've restricted the Tao by grabbing hold of that, and I'm going against the flow again. And so I've learned to just let it go. But it's trying to find that space where you don't keep grabbing things and trying to manipulate it, or even the thought, oh, so that's the answer. Let's go with this, is also restricting.
Right.
And it's learning to be constantly in that place of just let it go.
Yeah, and so I found the Tao, and it's
Yeah.
very much aligned with what you're saying. So it's entitled "Inspired Action." It's number 37,
Mm.
and it reads: "Tao never does anything,
Uh-huh.
yet inspires everything to do.
Mm-hmm.
When beings maintain the action of Tao, they spontaneously transform from within.
Yeah.
When that transformation acquires a name, i.e.,
Mm-hmm.
you give it a title that this is it.
Yeah.
External forces inspire actions from desire.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you want money. You said, this is the way, right? Like you transformed
Mm.
from within spontaneously. Then you saw
Yeah.
something. gave it an
Yep.
identity. Now these
Yep.
external forces of you wanting money are inspiring your actions. Tao isn't inspiring your, I mean, it is ultimately,
Yep.
but
Yep.
it's not like you're no longer aligned with that purity, right? You
Exactly.
have external forces inspiring you from your internal desires.
Yep. Yep. And
Actions
it's
without,
learning to let it go every time you spot it.
right. Actions without identity are free from external goals.
Yep. Yep.
Without desire, honoring stillness, all things are
Hmm.
at peace.
And it's being in that internal peace without the desire, without the naming, and just being there. And then Tao will, without action, cause action.
Right. Tao never does anything, yet
Mm.
inspires everything to do. That's
Yeah.
how this one starts, right? And so, like, you're being inspired through Tao. Now, you're also being inspired, like, and Dr. Rao and I talked about this the other day. You're also being inspired by Tao to identify and name that thing,
Mm.
right? That's also being inspired by Tao, but it isn't following or trying to emulate Tao, right? It is being inspired through Tao so that you can be here talking to me and growing
Mm.
further, right? Like, and having a
Yeah,
deeper
absolutely.
connection, right? All of those things are Tao. Like, Tao doesn't not exist in that. However, that is putting you in a position of having what you call struggle.
Yeah, because it's like I was inspired to talk to you, but I had no intention behind it or expectation for it. I just went with the moment, went, great, deeper connection, let's connect. No
Right.
idea where it's going to go, not going to name it, not going to have a desire for an outcome, just be with it.
Right. Yeah.
And through being with it and talking with you and having this connection through Tao, um, it's giving me a further clarity on what has been happening in my life before and a further clarity on the steps for me to take in the future.
Yeah.
Return to Tao.
That's right.
That should be my new motto. Return to Tao.
Well, like, there's another verse that's like, Tao is always returning. It is always coming back,
Mm,
and
yeah.
the returning, because I don't want to say it's impossible to keep and stay in Tao for, like, I mean, sure, maybe, but like, you're always returning. Because you're always returning for the same lesson from a different perspective,
Yes, exactly.
you
And
know.
I think that as long as we have, in my terminology, as long as we have a personality, as long as we have emotions and thoughts and behavioral patterns and so on, we will never be able to be permanently in Tao. And I think for me, that the evolution of living is to just learn to let go of those aspects of personality as best I can to be in Tao as much as I can.
Right. To just surrender.
Mm, yeah,
Just like
absolutely.
surrender at every moment, because you surrender and your body wants to take control again, right? You surrender,
Yeah.
and like, the body and the mind are constantly, and then getting to a place where it's like, okay, I can surrender even to that,
Mm,
right?
yes.
Without,
Yeah.
because like, once you start saying like, like, I want to surrender, well, that's a desire, right? Like, so it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
surrendering to everything. And once again, that's the returning. That's it coming back. That's like, now I see that me wanting to not want is a want, right? And like, a
Mm,
lot of people can talk about the idea that, like, well, you gotta not want and stuff. It's like, well, as soon as you say you gotta, like, as soon
you
as you say, like, this is my goal, well, now you're already like, that's a that's you trying to want your way into not wanting, and that's never gonna, that's not I mean, once again, inspired by Tao, but
yeah.
you know,
Yeah. It's. I can feel it. I can sense it. I'm aware of it, but I can't describe it.
Right.
Tao
No.
you can't
No.
describe. I know when I'm in that space of awareness. I know when I'm in Tao. I can sense it. I can feel it because there is no naming, because there is no desire, because there is total surrender.
Yeah. And
Um,
I want you to like.
and
I have a strange timer, so I only have like 5 seconds left with you. So if you
oh,
want
okay,
to go
right.
down, come back up, and then we'll wrap up. That'd be great. And I do have Dr. Rao in line, and we'll bring you up. I'm going to give Penny a second to come back in to see if she is going to. Yep, there she is. And then I'm going to go to Dr. Rao, and then we'll chat. Um, yeah, so great.
Yeah, I'll just come up
Okay, go
to wrap up. Yeah. So yes, I'm aware of that moment of being in the Tao. And I'm aware of that moment when my personality takes me out of it, when the desire forms. And it's just a matter of practice of being in that awareness, in that space of non-desire and surrender.
Yeah.
And thank you for your illumination once again. Lovely to catch up with you.
It was beautiful.
Really is. And I'll catch up again.
We'll talk.
Look forward to it.
All right.
Love you. Bye now.
Love you. Bye-bye. Okay, we're gonna. Oh, no, no. See, this is where things get weird. Um, yeah. Sometimes the app, when we both try and do things at the same time, it gets a little funky. Dr. Rao, how are you, my friend?
Good morning, Martin.
Good morning.
I'm here to do two things. One is announcement that in an hour, around 7 o'clock, I will do this proactive wellness. Today is kind of special because I'm going to do functional fitness my way. Yoga head to toe in 5 minutes.
Oh, nice.
Okay,
Short
so
and sweet.
this will be both on audio with this Noom vibe, and also it will be on Zoom for people who want to come. They can go to my link says and find that
Your
if the
Zoom room.
Zoom room is there, so I'll paste it there. So if anybody wants,
Oh,
so
beautiful.
I just want to tell you because you are my bird. I want to
Yeah, yeah.
make use of that. The second thing is I'm going to be quick because I'll be leaving anyway. Um, Tao doesn't do anything.
Right. That's the first line of the number 37. Dow never does anything.
Yeah. The formula is keep quiet.
Yes. Stillness.
Keep quiet. And then you are in it already.
Right. Yeah.
Just pay attention to, your attention has to be poised on that inner self.
Mm-hmm.
Then you don't have to do meditation and all those things, because if you are in the mind and you want to figure out what to do and all that, then you need meditation to calm it down.
Right.
But if you are Brahman, if you are Tao, you don't have to do anything. It doesn't
Yeah.
do it. See, the analogy for this better, Martin, is the screen.
Oh.
Movie plays on the
Yep.
screen.
Yeah.
But
I've utilized that. Like
yeah,
and I've given you
people,
plenty of credit for that. I
yeah,
love it.
it's a use it for understanding.
Right.
Be like the screen. Then you are aware that you are in Brahman, you are in Tao. You don't have to do anything.
That's right.
Even saying this universe will come to aid me, that's also your mind again.
Right.
Yeah, anyway, I don't want to be harping on that, but the previous speaker who was talking about it, I just mentioned that. We'll talk more about it later, Martin.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
I'll be on here
yeah,
because I'll be doing some other things, but I'll hold still for 5 minutes and
yeah,
I'll do the body work with you.
yeah. Well, it will be explained because people need to know. But once you got it, you will do that within 5 minutes. Okay?
Oh, beautiful.
Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you. And I want to just say, you can go. I'm going to just give you a little shout out. Dr. Rao, Dr. Rao, thank you so much for all that you contribute to this app and to this community. It is like you, I mean, out of all of the people that I connect with, it's always so wonderful to connect with someone that's just,
Ah, we are buddies. Don't worry.
yeah, I know. Like that's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
like we're brethren. So thank you.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much. And really, Dr. Rao provides is a great resource for being, is a great resource for ancient wisdom. And I mean, I present Tao of the Day. I am definitely presenting it from a Western sort of way, even though I attempt to be as as open to all things as I can, as surrender to it all. Dr. Rao can articulate things sometimes can articulate the mystery a lot better than I can. And yeah, and he also has knowledge in terms of Sanskrit and where these concepts come from and how they have evolved and what their sense is, right? Because I think that when we start thinking about Sanskrit, we are trying to get to the sense of something because it is closer to it is something interesting about language, like as it progresses, quote unquote, as it gets older, as we get further and further away from a time when it was just sensing, what happens is that it is more of a name. It is more of a symbol for what that is supposed to be. We read earlier, number 37 with Penny. Tao never does anything, yet inspires everything to do. When being, and what that means is you are inspired, right? That's Tao. You're always in Tao, right? When beings maintain the action of Tao, they spontaneously transform from within. Now that is maintain the action of Tao. That is like what Penny mentioned, in the flow of something. You're in the flow. You lose track of time. You just like whatever, you're working and doing the things that you're doing. And there's no expectation about this moment. When that transformation acquires a name or an identity, okay, when that transformation requires, like, you transform, you're like, oh, like, I loved fixing my house. Now I am a home builder. Well, you don't have to acquire a name because you loved it that one time. You might not like it when it's your job, when it has, like, when that external force inspires, once that acquires a name, then external forces inspire actions from desire. You have a desire. Oh, I want it to feel like that always. So I'm going to go out and get a job building homes because I enjoyed fixing my home. Well, no, that's not what that was about. You don't have to attach labels to all of these things. You can allow it to be. So, and maybe it's over. Maybe that's what you needed. Maybe you just needed to be in that moment at that point. But when you maintain the action of Tao, you will spontaneously transform from within. Oftentimes as an artist, I found people like maintain the action of Tao, and then boop, they box themselves into, I'm a painter, I'm a sculptor, I'm a ceramist, I'm a writer, I'm a this, I'm a this. It's like you're Tao in manifest, right? Like, so you're everything. You don't have to have that. You don't have to have that name. You don't have to allow those external forces. Like you're like, I want fame and I want money. It's like, well, all those things are surrounding you all the time. Can you embrace it? Or are you trying to grasp? Those sorts of things are, and grasping might get you money. Grasping might not. Like, who cares? But it is in those moments when you're able to maintain the action of Tao, when you're in flow and whatnot, that it's just, when you're not looking outside of yourself. And even Dr. Ross said, when you can maintain Tao, you don't have to meditate. Like I hardly ever meditate. I sit, and I look out the window, but I don't sit, close my eyes, put my, my middle finger and thumb together, my third finger and thumb together, mudra and stuff like that. There are times where I do that, sure. And those are times where, maybe I find myself not maintaining the action of Tao. But my life is a meditation. Like I fix my house, I'm meditating. I am driving and meditating. I am it's just doing, being, living. That is the meditation. You don't have to, set a timer and be guided into something. You just be. Because what happens when you meditate and you feel good, that might spontaneously happen, and then you're like, oh yes, I want to meditate more. It's like, well, has that acquired a name? Has your meditation acquired a name? It's like, this is my practice. And then external forces, I want to be, right? I want to let go. I want to not want. I want no desire. You start to get into this place of wanting to not want again. External forces then inspire action from desire. I'm going to read the last section of this, and then I'm going to go ahead and sign out. If you have a number between 1 and 81 that you'd like to select and read a little bit of the Tao, I'd be happy to host you. Actions without identity are free from external goals. Without desire, honoring stillness, all things are at peace. Honoring stillness, without desire, all things are at peace. Thank you so much for joining me for Tao of the Day. I'm Martin John. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my Tao Te Ching, you can do so at my website. The links are in my profile. Once again, in about 50 minutes, Dr. Rao is going to be talking about... I can never really explain what Dr. Rao is going to do. Dr. Rao is an amazing resource. Check him out. 50 minutes. He's going to be doing a show. And if you're available, I would encourage you listen to and hear what he has to say. Thank you so much for joining me for Tao of the Day. And until next time, and thank you, Penny, for coming up and picking 37. I sort of searched it out for you, but for going through that with me. Love you, dear. We'll be in touch. And until next time, keep covering yourself.